Hey, welcome to the debut interview series. I'm Kevin Cordy, that crazy practitioner of play, and this is one of my favorite times. You know why? Because I have three accomplished professional storytellers, and we're going to get to talk to them. If you have a question for the storyteller or you want to bring up an insight, you can just put it in the comment section, or you can just link it or star it or tag it or whatever word that I don't know. You can help by giving a response. Let me just tell you what the debut interview series is in relation to getting to debut. First of all, the debut interview series is where we learn a little bit about the tellers, but many of you know these tellers already. They are three accomplished storytellers who soon tell a story for the first time anywhere. They're accomplished, so it's the story that's the debut and not the teller. And then we give ourselves permission to play. And since I'm that crazy practitioner of play, we will play with the ideas of the story. At the same time, people will give suggestions, and we will have a way of getting tickets to the event. But before all that, we want to learn a little bit from the teller, find out a little bit about their process. There's never going to be enough time, but we're just going to tease it enough. So if you're listening, stay tuned, buckle your seatbelts. We're in for that ride for story. I'd like to introduce the first teller. The first teller was a native of Japan, trained in Japanese traditional theater before studying educational theater at NYU. I applied. Didn't go, but I applied. In New York, she performed in numerous plays and off Broadway productions, a dance troupe, acting and dancing summer camps, a full-time storyteller and actor at Walt Disney World for 11 years. She now performs annually at the Epcot's Japan Pavilion, and so much more. This is what's on paper, but let me tell you what I know about this person. This person has a generous spirit, not only for the telling, but for the tale. She cultivates and crafts it in a way that honors tradition, but at the same time puts a little bit of spice and life into the tale that makes it hers as well. She is a pleasure to know, speak with, and most of all, listen to. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only, right here on debut on the interview series, Karen Amano. Hey, Karen!
Hello, Kevin. Thank you so much for this warm welcome.
Well, I thank you so much for being here. I really do. We are honored to have you coming up on debut. And I'm going to ask you a question what I ask most everyone. How did you find story or story find you?
So, well, when I was 3 or 4, my dream was, going to be an actress or singer. In the future, I loved Japanese TV about Japanese businessman when I was 4, according to my mom. And, even I was kindergarten, I started writing and writing. Mom said, all the time I was writing story. And at the age of 8, I wrote a two-person uh, play to present the class uh, at the elementary class. I was 8, and I like to write science fiction stories. So I have many notebooks. 10 years old, 11 years old, I just kept writing. But I loved acting. So middle school, high school, I was in the drama club. seven, when I was 17 years old, I joined a Japanese theater company. Then, when I was fourth grade, I got into Hollywood films, and I loved Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Dustin Hoffman, and I was like, when I become adult, I'm going to New York and study acting like them. And so I decided to move to New York City after I'm done with Japanese college in Tokyo. And I was acting in Japan in theater and a small role in TV. And I moved to New York City with a couple of suitcases without knowing anybody. And then, I was doing some plays. I went to NYU, and I started doing a one-woman show. Also, I joined the Japanese folk dance company in New York, and there was sort of storytelling festival through dance. So I was asked to write a story, 45-minute story, and teamed up with my sensei, instructor of the dance company. So she did the beautiful Japanese movement using, folding fans, and then I told the story. I also moved and danced well. Uh, so that was my, yeah, first storytelling experience to people.
What a richness to bring in. So, what I hear is starting at 4 and 8 in writing stories, moving inside the world of theater at one of the prestigious NYU programs, which is supposed to be amazing, and then looking at your own story within the constitution of dance. So that leads me. What a beautiful, beautiful gifts, regalo, to bring to the world. And so they say there's a thin line between storytelling and theater. Since you've walked on both sides of that line, what would you say is a dividing line or a uniting line for storytelling and theater?
Yeah, theater, I think you have to be like, I don't know, perfect or perfectionist. um, and very competitive. And for example, when I was at the Fringe Festival, Orlando International Fringe Festival, but then I do my one woman show, then the review in the papers, oh, she has some Asian accent. So it's in storytelling world, it's welcome. All the culture, your foreign accents are welcome. It's considered to be unique. And yeah, storytelling, forgiving, everybody's welcoming and helping each other. Especially I in a group of Asian American storytellers in unity. We all help each other. And I'm not really criticizing theater world. I still do theater. I love theater. But it's very competitive. You know, sometimes we Japanese actors are getting into this one role. Typecast. So it's
And
like
there's
that.
beauty in. I love what you say about storytelling. Is forgiving and welcoming. I agree. I mean, there's been some circles that are like, oh, we don't do it that way, or we do it this way. But in the spirit of play, and some of theater rehearsal is in play, and some of storytelling is in play. That is just great to hear, and that we can learn from each art. But like you said, you can be trapped into a role, and that's what you do. I mean, I've talked to some people that are in summer stock theater that their only role is for the rest of the summer, which is a great gift as well. But that's the only role they play. In storytelling, there's versatility. How does play factor into your work?
Play into the work of
Of
storytelling.
you as a story maker, as you as a storyteller, or even a theater dance artist? How important is play to you?
Oh, I like I like a dialogue style and characterization in a story. I respect so many storytellers. They're like a magician of words and so deep, and they can create a beautiful stories. Uh, I wish I had that skill, but the lack of those skill, I just depend on animated movements or dancing and singing. Uh, so I use the play into my story to add more essence or elements.
And Karen, from seeing
And
some of your work, you have some of that animated work and that lively presentation. So I don't want you to undermine the great work that you are doing. And so, what are your next challenges as a storyteller? or what are your current challenges?
Oh, next challenge. This pandemic gave me more opportunity to try a new type of story, like a personal story. Um, I started as a Japanese folk tale storyteller. When I was doing One Woman Show in the theater, it was personal story. Uh, but this storytelling world, I have to be careful about the word. you know, it should be educational. It has to carry the, nice message. So yes, I'd like to work on more personal stories
Sure,
and
and
also study more. Yeah, how
I
to
love
create
it.
story.
And
Mhm.
and working with play helps us move and to see personal stories as well as fairy tales and folk tales and merging the traditions. Um, what is one of your biggest highlights of in the storytelling world?
Oh, highlights. Hmm. Well, when I was invited to National Storytelling Festival for the Exchange Place, that was like a big tent. Everybody was there, a couple thousand people, and they were so supportive. I remember like front row ethnotech is like this, my big brother, sister, like, I felt so much support in other yes members too over there. So yeah, that was a very great experience.
And folks, when she says a big tent, for those who haven't been in, there's 1,700 people in those tents. And I know that when I emceed at that tent, I mean, it's just really awesome to see that support, that love, that comfort, whether it's the Youth Educator Storytelling Special Interest Group, which we're both members, or the talented Ethnotech who has been shepherding tellers for many, many years and still doing wonderful at it. Um, so we really do need to support each other, don't we?
Yes.
And that's part of the purpose for a debut is to support both the story making and storytelling. We often only see ourselves at performance time, but the pandemic has allowed us to see a little behind the curtain, right? And are you
Yeah.
finding yourself working more with others and sharing ideas or less? Or what are your intentions regarding that? Like a lot of storytellers work by themselves, but um, the pandemic has opened some doors. How has it for you?
Yeah, definitely the ethnotech. Yeah, uh, created this group, Asian American Storytellers in Unity, and since March 2020, every Tuesday we got together and tried to do something. Created YouTube channel called uh, Asian American Storytopia. We did a Ukraine fundraising event last month.
Yes.
We raised $6,500,
Oh,
but
thank you for
still
that.
people are donating. Hmm. And environment conference, Earth Up for NSA. We also did a program too.
What a way to give back. So, Karen, let me ask you, why do debut?
You know, as an actor, I love it. Director gives you notes and oh, I can do this way and this way and this way. And then finding something really I like or fit into me. So I respect director and notes. So it'll be fun.
Excellent. And I'm
Let's
looking
play.
exactly. And play is the real work that we do. I so look forward to working with you on debut. If a storyteller is just starting out, and if they're starting out telling stories from their own country or culture, or they're just starting out, what kind of 3 or 4 tips of advice would you give that teller? Save them some time.
Oh, don't be afraid, and you can just start writing or just playing out. Uh, yeah, don't be afraid of, oh, this is not good enough or something. You just do it, then you get more. And then also, community is very important. So when I started as a freelance, I tried to join different storytelling organization. Started going to the storytelling conference and networking. That was really a treasure, and I met so many wonderful people and storytellers. So networking, just get started.
What great advice. I know I was teaching a graduate class on storytelling, and one person heard me tell a story and got up and said, "Well, I know. I'll be a storyteller. I'm now fully trained." I'm like, we had a little longer talk about it's an art, a discipline, and a science and a practice. But the one thing I didn't do is discourage her, but I did encourage her to do what you said, is to network, to find community. And guess what, Karen? Once you're part of the debut family, you are in to stay, unless you want to leave. We don't ever want you to leave. We're going to bring you back. I know that we could talk more. It's such an honor to have you on soon to be on debut. And if people are listening and they have a comment that they want to give, feel free to put it in Facebook, and we'll share it out or a question. But I want to thank you on behalf of debut for coming. We'll bring you back here a little later, but right now we're going to bring someone else on.
Thank you.
Thank you, and that's Karen Romano. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's just Karen is going to be telling soon, and let me tell you about our next teller. This teller, Ingrid has loved entertaining people through story and song since she was young. She's appeared in dozens of school and community theater productions for over 30 years. She's encouraged by family and friends. She's embarked on interactive theater and storytelling performance artists. So we have a mirror, just like Karen. She's moved within the world of theater. She's researched, written, and presented several theater productions and workshops for numerous clients in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. She's done this and so much more. This is what's on print, but let me tell you about this teller. What I love most about when listening to this teller is the joy and excitement that she brings in before, after, and during the story. You can tell she tells stories that she enjoys because the impact of the audience who enjoy listening to them. I think, from talking to her, she loves researching and discovering the numerous possibilities of the stories, as well as telling those stories. It is a warm day to bring on, ladies and gentlemen. She's right here on debut interview series, Ingrid Bond. Ingrid, how are you?
Kevin! I am doing supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
And that's a great way to be. Let me ask you a question I always ask in some way or another to everyone as the first question. What brings you to story, or story brings you to you?
One of my earliest memories is, and actually, I unearthed it because mom gave me my report cards. She kept report cards from I. And it's Ingrid is a wonderful storyteller. She just doesn't know when to stop. So apparently, I interrupted class a lot because and I was emotional about it because I didn't want to stop telling stories. But I've oh my goodness, I've just been blessed. I've had people, my great grandmother read to me, and I remember her saying, "Ingrid, why don't you read me this story?" And it was just that feeling of confidence. It was so wonderful. A grandfather who used to take walks with me. He worked for the Reading Railroad, um, and that's some of my fondest memories. I'm trying to think of what else. We had this I remember watching the interview you had with Oni Lasana, and she talked about the record player that she had. We had a record player just like that. You'd put the record on, and a film strip would come up as the story was being told, and you got to see all the images. I had neighbors who would tell me stories. Uh, I had school plays, and just I just love talking to people and finding out about who they are. That I think is one of my most favorite things. I was told that I'd be a better interviewer um, than anything else because I love finding out about people and what makes them tick. It's the most amazing thing. But um, what ended up happening is I went to school for communications at university. T for Temple U. Wanted to go for theater, but didn't. And I ended up doing some corporate jobs. And my one friend that I was working next to, her name was Nancy. I remember it vividly. We were working for little bikes. You know the toys that they have. I was doing customer service for them. And every phone call was an adventure. They would either praise you or cuss you out. And she and I, some of the best, we would mute ourselves and laugh our behinds off because these folks were so um, they were so electrified because either their child was upset because their toy was broken, and there was a story, a sob story after sob story of why aren't you doing this, or why aren't I getting this for free, even though I ran it over with my car? I should be getting things for free. So my friend Nancy one day looked at me and she said, Ingrid, what are you doing here? Why are you here? You should be telling stories. You're fabulous at it. So then she told me about a woman who dressed up as Mother Goose and went in schools and libraries and told stories. And I thought to myself, wow, that sounds like a fabulous thing for me since I did a lot of plays and I did a lot of acting. Um, so Kevin, I quit my job and I jumped in with both feet, which I don't I really don't do unless you do a little bit of research and find out exactly what all goes into storytelling. It's not just the entertainment, there's just so much behind it.
Uh, Definitely. And, the whole idea of there's a place for those of us who like to tell stories, especially if we're trying to get something for free. They will make up the stories continually. And you're right, there's so much business to storytelling that we only see the performance arm. It reminds me of a time that I walked into an old room and this person handed me a placard and said, read that. And I said, you two can make $100,000 just by, and I looked at the room I'm in, and it certainly wasn't even $100,000 room. And they said, you have the job. And I said, what do you mean? All I did was read that. He said, you know how many people can't read, let alone read that? And so there's a lot of business in storytelling. And we need to work for the ones that we're committed to. And we're so glad that you were able to make that leap. I know sometimes it's scary, but what has been some of those joyful moments in story? Or what is those that you stopped and went, oh, am I doing the right thing?
Oh my goodness. Goodness, how much time do we have?
Not too
We
long.
only have so much time for me to tell you how many times um the joy is when I know my audience is going on the same trip I am. That is my joy. When I hear laughter, when I see smiles, when I see people sitting on the edge of their seats, when I know that I am reaching someone as much as that story has reached me, what else is there? I did an elementary school not that long before the pandemic, pre-pandemic, and I had all the kids with me. I do interaction, a lot of interaction. I want the kids to be a part of the story with me rather than me just telling. After the show was done, I received a high five and a hug from one of the students. And the that type of feedback to me is what else is there? The love of a child, um, and I've received several. um, kudos and testimonials from people, but that me when you get the emotional feedback, that physical, it means the world to me.
I definitely understand that. I remember once young little girl was walking down the hallway and she looked at me after a storytelling performance and said, "Thanks for the movie." And I thought, hey, I'm not correcting her. It was a movie.
Oh my goodness.
And that's the joy, like you just said, when a kid can live in that world. I mean, for me, story defies age limits. And there are some people that are like, oh, I don't tell to teenagers, I don't think they listen. And I'll say, when's the last time you've worked with teenagers? I don't. Well, then how do you know? They want to laugh at King Arthur and Brer Rabbit, right? And so you've worked
Yeah,
both.
and they also wanna be a part of the story.
Very much. And that leads to play. So, how has play been a factor in your world?
Wow, really quick, when I was young, Kevin, I don't know where you grew up. When I grew up, there was I on a road that went through my neighborhood. There were no other streets, just one road. We knew each and every one of our neighbors, and, uh, we did have TV, but most of it was go outside and play. So, I mean, I we made up so many amazing different things. We made rocks out of cars out of rocks. We used trees as, places to gas up our bikes. They were stations. You know, we rode our bikes everywhere, and just such a new neighborhood that I grew up, and because of that, I so much for me is play. I mean, you have the written word, but to be able to manipulate that and turn it into something that is going to be so much fun for your audience, and that they're going to be able to be a part of what you put together. I play with everything. I play with each and every story I have, and some of the stories you find are piecemeal. So you have to put that together, and you have to play with it in that respect. I did one story, um, called Pele and Kahawali, and I had about 4 or 5 different, renditions of it, and I had to absolutely, puzzle piece them together to be able to get a story that, was made for the stage, that was made for a program. So, man, I play a lot with every story that I have, and I want everybody to have such a good time, so you have to add that element, or else where's the joy? And you're stiff. You're not having fun.
I just love about getting unleaded from trees, and the whole idea of playing. I too, one stoplight town, and you're right. Where is the joy? And sometimes as storytellers, we get rigid in our thinking that we're only this type of storyteller, or we only tell these types of stories. The micro and macrocosm of the world is so large that it's really hard for me to say, I only want to tell these stories. I like to take risks. I like to jump in head first into the mouth of the dragon, you know, and and just play. And I know you do too, Ingrid. I know that what brings you to the story that you select.
Oh my goodness. It has to speak to me. I have to see myself, in the characters. I was speaking to, a professional storyteller, and she said the same thing, that the story kind of chooses her, and it's the same way for me. If I don't feel like I have some kind of connection with the characters, I do a lot of underdog type of stories, uh, where obviously the underdog comes out and is victorious. But the characters have to speak to me, and the story I chose for debut, the characters were just by it, and I am so excited to tell. Um, But yeah, the characters and the storyline has to speak to me, or else it's dead.
Feel free to tease a little bit about what your debut story is about, but I'll cut you off if you tell the whole thing because that's what debut's about.
Oh my no, no. I was telling you it's an Appalachian story, and
Wow.
it's a wonderful tall tale. And the tale just keeps getting bigger and bigger on down the line until you at the end you're like,
Oh, don't tell
"Really?" This
it.
you thank you for taking me on this wonderful ride. Nope, that's it.
I
No,
love
no,
it.
no, no, no.
We
But I
all
was just drawn to it, and I thank goodness.
we all deserve to buckle in, and people are giving sending hearts and thumbs ups, and if you have a question for Ingrid or Karen's going to be coming back later, please let us know. We appreciate all that. Ingrid, um, save the storyteller a few steps. What should they know as they plan to go into the world of storytelling? Don't abandon everything until you do the homework. I heard you say that.
Uh, yeah, exactly. It has to come from an absolute love of story, and it has to be part. It has to be air you breathe, the food you eat, and the water you drink. That's because if this if storytelling isn't that you, then you're just not going to grow. And as storytellers, we have to grow. Watch people. Watch as many storytellers as you can. Don't take on their mannerisms, but watch as many storytellers and realize that there is a place for you. And if you don't do personals, it's okay. If you do folk, fairy tales, myths, and legends, that's okay. Never apologize. Um, take workshops. Take workshops from people who are knowledgeable, and never be afraid to ask questions. Never be afraid to reach out and ask for help. Um, go to as go to as many performances as you can, and just be live. Virtual is nice, but if you can be live and just and feel like what the audience is like, then you'll know what you're going to be like up on stage. You'll figure out who are you, and what's the best way to bring you to life on a stage.
And that's rich advice. The only thing I would add is play, 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 and be reflective about the work that you do, and join in as
Oh my goodness, yes.
bring in a community. Bring in a community. Ingrid, it is so important that we learn from the experiences that you've had. We're going to be bringing you back later. I so appreciate that you are going to be on the virtual playground very soon. In fact, let me just do a little advertisement for that. Yes, you can see Ingrid, Brian Fox Ellis, and Karen at May 29th. There's a $12 ticket or whatever you can pay because we don't want price to be prohibitive. And it supports the tellers and debut, and we hope that you can support us. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Ingrid, thank you for being here. We so appreciate you. We'll have you back here on soon. Well, there's Karen
Thank
for
you.
some reason, and let's just see. Here we go. And the telling continues, or the talk about telling. So let me tell you about the next teller that we have. A good friend of mine from a storyteller's tour of the Louvre in Paris to a campfire in the mountains of North Carolina, from the historical Sandwich, Illinois Opera House to an international conference on wetlands conservation in Washington, D.C., Brian Fox Ellis has been regaling stories, audience of all ages, sizes, anyone, for more than 35 years and so much more. That's what's on paper. Let me tell you a little bit about what I know. First of all, we were very young in storytelling together. I consider him part of my storytelling family. We started with burning curiosity and it hasn't ended. And the wonderful thing is that Brian knows the rich inherent value and the educational impact that a good story can have, whether it's through personifying people like Abraham Lincoln or Mark Twain or numerous other people. There's always a cadence of also Brian Fox Ellis. And whether you're listening to Fox or you're listening to Lincoln, you're listening to someone spectacular and commanding, and a good friend who never fails to see a new way to share story. And it is so, so wonderful to have my friend here, and I'm sure he'll soon be yours, right here on debut, Brian Fox Ellis.
Well, I am thrilled to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Kevin. It's been a while.
It has been, but I'm so
One
glad
little
to see you.
detail is I do not play Lincoln. I'm not tall enough or ugly enough, though the second part's debatable. I actually play 7 friends and rivals of Lincoln. I play his boyhood friend, his law partner, Civil War general, Walt Whitman. So I tell Lincoln's story from several different perspectives.
You
And that's part
know,
of how I play with the stories of Lincoln. When you tell it from a best friend's point of view, you get to know Lincoln from a different perspective.
Fox, I do the same thing for Houdini. Houdini comes on for one sentence, and I from Bess and from his rabbi father, and there's just nothing like telling the stories from the vantage points of other people. I know that Kathleen Kroll had a book on the neighbors of famous people. So the whole book was Einstein's neighbor, what he said. That guy made so much noise.
That's great.
Fox, let me ask the story. The question I usually ask: what brings you to story, or how did the story find you?
Well, like most storytellers, I have 7 or 8 answers, depending on who's asking. Um, Part of it is I grew up in a family that told stories. So I grew up in the North. My father's family were from the South. We did a lot of coon hunting and fishing and sitting around the fire, telling stories is what you do. Um, I ran summer camps for the first 10 years, and telling stories around the campfires, what you do. And I have very little formal theater training. Actually, did some high school plays. That's the extent of that. But I loved being on stage, and I did some master classes. Like, I'm warning you, it's a bad joke, but I studied African dance at the Joffrey Ballet in New York City for a 1-hour workshop. I studied pantomime with a student of Tony Montanaro, as
Ooh.
did Milbury Birch and several of my friends and heroes. Um, and I really felt like working at the craft brought story together. But the first time I made a living, I got a job, was I was 17, telling stories around the campfire. People were paying me to do this. But I actually made a living for 10 years before I knew storytelling was a career. I called myself the eternal summer camp counselor because when I wasn't at camp, I was running children's programs at weekend conferences. And literally every weekend for most of the year, I was doing these events. And then I went to the National Storytelling Festival, and I'm like, oh, that's what I am. That's what I do. And I apologize that I did have to move outside. I own a theater art gallery, and I forgot that Monday night we have Irish dance classes. And so right now they're doing hard shoe dancing, so I had to move out back. But we have good Wi-Fi, so
Hey, I love that you not only tell and support the art, but you host the art. So if we get a little wind, it's perfectly fine. So yeah, the first time at the National Storytelling Festival, it's always a wonder, isn't it? That some people are like, "Oh, you did this as well," or "I do that too." And we've been on this journey for a while. Fox, how have you changed over the years as a storyteller, and what influenced those changes? Not necessarily the influencers, even though you can tell those.
yeah, a couple of things. First off, I started off doing a lot of young kids programs because I used to think storytelling was for kids. I still do love it, but I did a lot of fairy tales and folk tales. You know, I'm part Salagi or Cherokee, so a lot of Native American stories. But I didn't take the advice I was given, and that was to find your niche and do this thing. And if you do this thing, you get known for doing this thing. And I'm like, no, 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 no. I like diversity. So every year I choose something I know nothing about and dive in. And So for a while, it was stories around the world. I would choose cultures or countries, um, and go like immerse myself. Go like I spent several weeks walking in Italy, sleeping in caves, traveling as a wandering mendicant to learn the life of Saint Francis. And I now perform as a friend of Francis. Um, and that led to more one-man shows. Then I got hired to do John James Audubon, which is still one of my favorite characters. I'm one of the few storytellers who works the bird watching circuit, and then that led to others. So the Field Museum invited me to be Charles Darwin, and for his 200th birthday, and I toured the country as Charles Darwin for the year. But every year, looking for something new. Every year, stretching myself, trying something different. And lately, it has been more of these one-man shows in character. But because I love folk tales, I'm now reflecting that back. So I play Wilhelm Grimm. Actually, went to Germany and spent several weeks researching their life. I taught a graduate course for Southern Illinois University on Grimm's fairy tales. I just developed the Scandinavian storyteller. I live in a Swedish settlement, Bishop Hill. My wife and I run a bed and breakfast. And so I now play Peter Christian Bjornsson, who collected East of the Sun, West of the Moon, and a lot of Scandinavian folklore. Um, so doing that one man show, but getting back to folk tales and kind of bringing those two worlds together has been a recent development.
Fox, I'm so glad that you didn't take that advice. In fact, you looked at me one time and we were laughing, and then you got serious and you said, Kevin, I think there should be 7 resonant effects of any one thing that you do. And you
Yes.
exemplify that. You said whether it's an article, a book, or a performance. And you know what I think it is that you have a great for the curiosity of the stories that you tell. You're one that we can talk about the story making process as much as the storytelling, and give the credence it needs to have. So, tell me a little bit about the story making process. How do you go about making a story?
Well, without giving anything away, for Sunday, I still haven't made up my mind which story I'm going to write.
You're not alone in that. Often debuters are there.
I have 3 that I'm working with, and it is this combination of spending time in my imagination, even if it's nonfiction, kind of fleshing out the details of what was this world like in that time. Um, but because I'm toying with 2 different family stories, I'm hoping to talk to my brothers and do some oral history interviews to get their perspective on some of these details. Um, and I don't script. I actually published 15 books during COVID, which is basically just writing down my shows. And so what I tend to do is I do the show 10 or 20 times, playing with ideas, playing with scenes, playing with the characters, and then I write the show. Then I turn it into a book and a magazine article and a CD or DVD or now a YouTube channel. I'm managing 3 YouTube channels for different organizations uh, because I want to tell stories on every platform.
I
That's
love it.
important to us.
And that's for those who choose that option, and I'm one of them, we want to have a voice that resonates, and we want to bring people in. And it is so important. I actually call that process word dancing. I believe that
Yeah,
we need to dance in the world that we make before we ever put it to the printed page. Does your
I've
work
heard you
echo
use that
that?
phrase. Yes. Yes, I would agree. And it is, also playing with the audience because you don't know if it works until you see their facial expression, you get their feedback. And if you're rewriting and rehearsing at the same time before you write it down, once you sit down with the pad and paper, or now I'm typing more, um, then you get a sense of what works because you remember that smile on that kid's face, or you remember that puzzled look on the teacher's face to help you clarify or refine something. So
So, Fox, I know you probably have many of these moments, but coming from the point of word dancing or telling out loud before putting something, what's a moment that couldn't be captured if you were just sitting at a solitary desk writing down the ideas? What's something that you found in either a character or a tale that you were kind of creating in your head as you organically saw it or whatever?
a lot of that plays with humor because you know, I like to think I'm funny. I'm not a comedian, but when you're playing with an audience, you're watching their response. You get these spontaneous moments that ring a bell. The audience laughs, and you're like, "Oh, I got to remember that one, and I'll use it again." And and then that makes it easier to shape the humor on a page because you've seen the audience response. You have a sense of the right rhythm and vocabulary to, because there are funny words. There are words that are just funnier. So, and you
Yeah.
don't know that till you tell it out loud.
You say the word pernicious, it's a funny word. You like it. And you say it differently, it's a funny. And
Yeah.
humor is an arch that bends into seriousness and bends into everything else. And it really is something that is a predictor of the direction of where you need to go. People are like, well, I'm not humorous. And you just said, I don't see myself as a comedian, but I can see the funny. So tell me a little more about what that looks like.
Well, one of my newer shows, I just got commissioned by the Illinois Audubon Society. We're
Congrats.
celebrating our 125th year.
Ah,
So they commissioned me to play an Illinois ornithologist, Robert Ridgway. And he wrote literally 30,000 pages of very dry, boring science description of birds, published in 9 volumes. It's just this massive tome about, several thousand species. Um, but when you're going to some of the detail of that with an audience and you can watch their response, you can find the funny. And if you read Robert Ridgway's personal letters, and he wrote more popular science articles for Illinois Audubon magazine, like one of my favorite, he planted this grove to restore the habitat, and some kids come in and cut down a couple of evergreen trees to sell as Christmas trees. And so he published an opinion piece in the local newspaper about, don't be cutting down my Christmas trees.
I love it.
It's a little bit like an old man wagging his finger, but it has a tongue-in-cheek tone that you can really hear when you read it out loud. And so playing with that with the audience helped me to find some humor in this.
Scientists don't write 30,000 words without passion. I mean, when
Right,
you
right.
you might have to read their personal letters. I mean, just the other day I found out Einstein played the violin. Imagine.
Yeah.
And, and I imagine his notes were even heard in his writing. It is so important. So, how does play work in your work?
Well, the other thing I've been doing a lot more because I do a lot of scientific nonfiction, and it just came through a series of Earth Day, Arbor Day programs where I'll do 4 or 5 shows outdoors with a group of kids, 100 kids in each show. And I'll pick a theme like birds or trees or whatever. Like I have a beautiful cherry tree right over my shoulder here. And whatever tree we see, we talk about. And I'll, on the spot, create a story um, by first interviewing the kids, 100 kids, having a conversation about trees and what they know about trees and what tree is that and how do I know that's a cherry tree. And then based on that brief conversation, I'll I'll get them up to act out some of the animals who depend on the tree, kind of like Lynn Cherry's capon tree. Or I will get them to stand up and act out the life cycle of a tree. And really engaging the audience in their play gives me room and implied permission that I can do a lot more improv. Actually, just wrote an article about this process for a Green Teacher magazine. I'm not sure if they'll publish it, but that's how I'm going to submit it.
They should.
Yes, but it's the idea of like I do a lot of trail type storytelling as well, and so when I'm hiking down the trail and we're doing a bird walk, we don't know what birds we're going to see. I looked up because a European tree bear just landed on the fault line above me, and so I can tell stories about whatever bird we're seeing, and based on the audience's questions, based on their interactions, I can play with them and get them more engaged in that and getting them thinking about creating story together. And the hike is a journey, going back to Joseph Campbell's traditional, mythic journey tales, but with true science emphasis.
And it is so important. I mean, science is about doing, and sometimes we go into outside or inside a museum, and all we're reading is a placard. You, as a storyteller, bring it life. So,
I do a
Ryan,
lot of work in museums for that reason.
exactly. And I went to a few museums myself and said, look, let's teach the docents to tell the story, to envision the story, to ask the questions, like you just said. Find out what the kids know about the trees, and then move the story. And here's the beauty: is you're using the science to tell the truth of what they see.
Yep.
And in certain fictions, you can also use fiction.
Well, one of my favorite things in museum settings is to take their staff on a tour of their museum
I
and
love
their
it.
collection that I've never seen before. And I do this often. It's become my part of my shtick that I love is I'll stand in front of a work of art and I'll say every work of art tells 7 stories, and I'll tell a 3 sentence story, snap my fingers, turn around, and tell another 3 sentence story, snap my fingers, another 3 sentence story, and I'll talk about the artist, I'll talk about the time period, I'll talk about what was going on in the world at that time, I'll talk about what was going on in art history at that time, I'll talk about the materials. Is it a bronze sculpture or is it a marble sculpture or is it oil painting or watercolor? Um, and talk about clearly the influences of this artist or this artist's influence on other artists and the context. So there's 7 stories about one work of art.
I actually love that. Fox, I initially thought you would say you would go into the museum of their museum and ask them to tell the story.
Well,
Because
that's part 2. So I modeled it with 7 stories, 3 sentences each. And then I do these day-long intensive workshops for museum staff. Uh, and by the end of the day, they all have a dozen new stories. Uh, and
that
that's
is
really
super
fun.
cool. So we're going to bring you on again in a few minutes with everybody. But what advice do you have to those people that are starting in the story or have already been experienced and think they know everything story offers? I mean, I got to admit, I'd been storytelling a long time before I found improv and before I found play, and then studying rich new dimensions. Like you said, you just got to keep your eyes wide open and respond.
Mm-hmm.
Don't necessarily go to the niche. Hear it from Fox. Spread yourself wide. But I don't want to give the advice. Tell me, Fox.
Well, that would be my first advice. Avoid being put in a box and change what you do, and always learn something new. Choose a new type of folktale or a new part of the world, or if you haven't done personal narrative, try it out. If you are only doing personal narrative, look at how folklore can influence personal narrative. So I think keeping it fresh, challenging yourself is the best advice. The other thing is, marketing. How do you make a living at this? So finding different ways to use your talent. During COVID, I worked with PBS to create 2 TV series. And then I also did some online corporate training for a company in Germany. Uh, and those are things that kept bread on the table. So.
So never say you that weather and everything else will or disease or anything will stop you. Just look at it a different way. Call PBS, see what's happening, and all our tellers can offer new ways. That's the other thing is the storytelling community is very supportive, and I've learned from you, Fox, and I appreciate it so much. I'm going to bring you on in about 2 seconds, but I thank you for all that you've given.
Yes, looking forward to the conversation. Hi, Karen.
Ladies and gentlemen, and Facebook and soon to be YouTube watchers, if you want to contact these tellers, they love to go out and tell. We encourage you to do so. But right now, we're going to let you either ask questions or they have questions among themselves or things that they've thought about. Let's bring them back. We have Karen coming in. Amano, thank you, Karen. Brian Fox Ellis. And thank you, Brian and Ingrid Bond. So let me start us off. So Facebook watchers, if you have a question, you can put it out. I see hearts and smiles, and I always love seeing the emoticons. But also this is a chance to ask questions, and sometimes they even read it when it's only a recording, and they can respond. But let me just ask this: in what way would you like to have learned early? What would you have liked to learn early about the art of storytelling? And any of you can answer, or all of you can answer.
Go ahead, Ingrid.
Ingrid. You're muted, Ingrid. The silence is golden. Let me just help her.
Okay.
There you go.
Oh my gosh, I'm so am
You're
I on
good.
now?
You're good. You're
Oh,
live.
I pushed the wrong button. No, it's okay, it's that storytelling existed. I mean, as Brian Fox Ellis said, he showed up at the National Storytelling Festival and goes, "Oh my gosh, that's me. That's what I do." And Karen, that's what you do. And I've heard so many people say they've come to it just on handstands mistake, and they didn't really know that was a thing that they could do, that you could make money out of it. So yeah, just storytelling existed. Schools teach it. It's so important for teachers in high school to let kids know
And
who are bent on theater, um, that storytelling exists,
and before we
and
next,
that it's a career path.
I
Kids
want to
need to
give a
know these things.
plug. Before we hear the next person, you can hear all these three tellers on May 29th, Sunday at 2 o'clock. We hope you can come, and you can watch this recording if you don't get the actual link. But who else would like to respond to that?
I shifted because the wind shifted, and I'm hoping this will be less wind noise. But the thing I wish I would have known sooner is uh, the mentoring community. Um, when I first got started, we were talking earlier. I was a punk kid, and I acknowledge that. I'm a little proud of it, actually. um, and having a few older storytellers who are willing to have some good conversations, to encourage me, to help me, along. Um, but I do wish there were more of that. And because storytelling tends to be a lone wolf thing, that we're out here on our own. So I've made a point recently, like 20 years ago, but to turn around and help other people. And I actually found it intriguing. My first 10 years, most of my mentees, were older than me. They were retiring teachers in libraries, and I was 40 and they were 60. And but I helped launch the career of several other storytellers just because I felt this need to give it back. So building those relationships with mentors, or if you're a mentor, turn around and give the next generation a hand up. I wish I would have known more about that when I was younger.
I remember 4 o'clock in the morning hotel conversations with Brian, where we were just like, "Where do we go? What's next? What's going
Yeah.
on?" So many years ago, and there's nothing like the beauty of helping someone, but you have to look behind you to see who's there, and you got to look in front of you to see who's there. Karen, any response to that question?
Yes, I didn't know that this, occupation storyteller exists until I
Guys be
really,
quiet for a minute.
you know, uh, see my friend, for example, Kiko Yamamoto, uh, professional storyteller, and yeah, it was amazing, and I wish I knew much earlier. And when I went to school, after I did the performance, kids said, "Well, when we heard the storyteller is coming, I I didn't know that such a thing like the profession existed." And but after seeing your performance, now I know. So that was very nice to hear. So kids should be exposed to storytelling more.
Very much so. Kids need to see storytelling, and they need to see performance of storytelling and the making of storytelling. When we have bird watchers telling the stories, I mean, bringing people in. I mean, that's an amazing thing. When we have, I think storytelling, and I'm biased, but I can give you the research to support it, is the greatest meaning making tool we have available. But it's storytelling and story making. I'm going to give a shout out to my sister, who is also a storyteller of sorts. We would fight over who would tell the best story on why we were getting home late, and so much more of that. Now I'm going to let you all each ask a question to each other or to the people will answer, and I'm going to start with Ingrid, and Karen and Brian will answer your question, and I may as well.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Brian, I so appreciate the fact that you brought up about mentorship because I I want to grow a storyteller, and all of the different venues that you've done and the chance that you've taken, I would love to hear your story. I so would love to hear your story and be mentored. Just any advice you could give, and same thing with Karen. I would appreciate, and Kevin, I hear you have storytelling courses. I had no idea, but just um, giving of your time so that I can go out there and flourish would just be absolutely awesome. So I just ask that if you would allow me to do that, I would be so appreciative, so appreciative.
So the easy answer to your question is yes. um, I do think
Uh,
uh, I don't want to speak ill of the community, but there's a difference between giving people a leg up and helping them and scolding. Um, and I heard some of both. Um, but I've made a real commitment to turn around and give a leg up to most of my work is not in the storytelling community. You don't see my name popping up at festivals and stuff. There's a couple local festivals because I'm on the committee and I know the people and they like me. But I've chosen to bring storytelling to new worlds and to really reach out and find different places. Like I'm probably the only storyteller you'll ever meet who works the Upper Mississippi Floodplain Management Conference circuit. And who knew it was a circuit? But I've done, 5 conferences in 1 year and about a dozen in the past couple pre-COVID. Um, Room full of PhD engineers and aquatic ecologists and Army Corps, dam builders, talking to them about how do we restore the great Mississippi River and all of its tributaries. And I've got lots of great stories. My mentor in there is the beaver. The beaver's the best engineer. And the more we can learn from a beaver, the better. Um, and passing it off to Karen, I'm really intrigued with your background in traditional Japanese dance and New York theater world and how you bring those together to the storytelling stage. What little bit I've seen of your work, you see those connections, and it's beautiful the way you've adapted that to more of a folklore setting. So, what ways have storytelling encouraged you to turn around and help the next generation? I love what you're doing with the Asian storytelling group, for example. So,
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me? It's very echoed to me. You okay? Yes. So Brian, how I put the Asian the traditional movement uh, into the storytelling world? Is that your question? So, mhm. uh, yes, like I said at the interview earlier, I was so into Western culture, like Hollywood films, and I want to learn English. But when I came here, now it's like appreciate my own culture, and I want to, yeah, show my culture to other people, and especially, the privilege that starts from the early age. So I would like, American kids uh, to see Asian culture more when they're young. Uh, so that's why I wear traditional outfit, use tell Japanese folk tales, and also I would like my telling to be also entertaining too at the same time, carrying the message and also entertaining. So that's why yeah, I'd like to introduce my culture in entertaining. So therefore, movement and singing, and the costume I want to put into the storytelling.
Excellent. And while Karen's thinking of her question to ask, let's do a well, let's talk about my sister again. Let's do a selfish plug if I can find it. There we go. You can see these tellers on Sunday, May 29th, 2 o'clock Eastern Time. And they're amazing. You'll see that on the interview and you'll see it at the event. Karen, what question do you have?
To
Any one of
Ingrid.
them.
Yeah. when you had in the past when your storytelling performance, when you had a tough situation, uh, what did you handle it? Either no reaction or too wild in a performance place. How did you handle it?
If I'm understanding you, children that are um kind of like ants in the pants, not sitting still, and how I deal with the distractions. Okay,
Yes, either
I
distraction
would
or
make them part of
no
the
reaction.
story.
Okay.
I would make them. I'm sorry, say that again.
Oh
Karen,
yes, yes, either yeah, wild or
or
no
docile,
reaction, like
no reaction.
a cricket.
I I've learned. I got really lucky. Um, I had a young boy in one of my storytelling shows. He was high functioning Asperger's. I made one of the um one of the characters in my show. He stole the show from me. He did because he ad libbed and we had a lot of fun and I worked with it. And you just have to work with it and everybody listens differently. A child could be doodling, a child could be, put over their head, et cetera, et cetera. You don't know that they're not listening. And to have your ego like go out the window is the most important thing. Not thinking I'm not reaching anybody. I'm so not reaching anybody. Maybe you're reaching that child who's out of control. And you just need to reel them in and them part of is that they know they're important. Each and every child or each and every adult to think that they performance.
And I would just
That's
add one little thing is that I'm reminded that when I was doing full time high school storytelling teaching every day, my students, I had a youth storytelling group that would study from 5 to 20 hours a week after school just to study storytelling. And all my kids had leadership positions. Instead of a stage manager, there was a story manager, a story co-chair, that kind of thing. And they made all these decisions. And I got so rooted in the story. I remember one student said, Mr. Cordy, you got to remember, we're here more than just for story. We're here for each other. And I think about in that in storytelling performance is sometimes we take a break and we breathe to be back together. Sometimes we take a moment and we say, wow, where did we just travel? And sometimes you can do that during the story. Most often you don't. But I've been exploring that more often where I can stop and break so that I can bring them back in. And that's one of the rules people are like, never stop the story. But I'm the play guy, I'm the crazy guy. So I'm going to say, oh, let's stop and just take a moment. And I never thought that way but I want to find where we make the best impact. And sometimes it's breathing, stepping out to step in so that you can stay more. I hope that makes sense. So the last thing, and we've spent a great bit of time together, and I so appreciate every one of you. I learn from all of you, and I'm going to learn even more when we play together on the virtual playground. I just want you to finish this sentence. When you come to debut, you will see. And I'll just do the end one after I hear all three of you. And it could be from your story. It can be from what you think. It can be from the price of tea in China. I don't care. But I'm going to start with Fox. And he's muted, so you're going to hear silence.
When you come to debut, you will see a new story grow from a seed to a sprout to a fully formed fruiting tree.
Ingrid.
When you come to debut, what you will see is, wow, all of me. You will see each and every part of my personality come out, and you will see me play. You will see this story go from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum, and at the end, it's all good, and we're going to have a great time.
Thank you. Karen.
When you come to see debut, you will see three totally different style storytelling and different culture, and you'll be entertained.
When you come to debut, you might see a dragon that only knows Italian. You might see an elephant that jumps twice as high as the sky only to land on the back of a buffalo. You might see your great uncle in the words, the silence, or the sound. I don't know, but you will know because you will have what you do see: three talented tellers that bring us worlds that are first time appearing in the world of debut. And then they will play and play again, and what you will see is the community that we bring together. Ladies and gentlemen, come to the community, the virtual playground, with these extremely amazing friends and colleagues, talented tellers, live on debut. Thank you very much. We'll see you there.